Okay, today I'm just outside Wimbledon with Tony Calvin. Tony, thank you very much. I've looked back through our messages, and the first one I asked you, Tom asked you to do this was in 2018.
Jesus.
So I am persistent, and so were you, but ultimately, thanks very much. You've agreed to.
5 years. God, you are a persistent old dog, aren't you? It's kind of. I always think about, because I'm pretty vocal in what I say on the Wade In podcast and the Racing Only Better podcast and social media. I just think everyone just kind of like knows what I'm all about anyway. But hopefully, there's a few things here that I haven't divulged as yet, but happy to now.
Right, so you've been in the industry since 1987, so I imagine that's pretty much all your work in adult life.
Yeah.
You've been a freelancer for a decade already. Do you enjoy the freedom that gives you compared to working for a Betfair and the Racing Post?
Yeah, I mean, when I first joined the Racing Post in '87, that's a strange story in itself, because I was going to go to Warwick University to read history, but through my brother Michael, who's an author and a sports journalist, he knew Howard Wright, who was from the Telegraph, and Howard was then at the Racing Post. So through him, I got a 6-week job at the Racing Post in the summer of '87, and I ended up staying there for 11 years. I didn't go to university, and that's what kind of like formed it, really. I just always involved from racing from a young age, going down the betting shop with my old man and the dog when I was 4 or 5. It was something, the racing and betting caught me very, very early, and I mean 4 or 5. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about the Racing Post later, but now you've mentioned it, we'll go into that. So, what was your original job? Because that was the Racing Post was only a year old at that point.
It was. I joined, like I said, just a pretty dog's body in the what was called the Information Services Department, dealing with kind of like keying in form, dealing with kind of like data. Weatherby's sent their entries through there and they were processed and put out into the computer. It was like very formal. It was like seat of the pants stuff at the Racing Post, and it was like, it was chaos. Even a year in, there'd still people be sleeping there overnight trying to sort out problems with the print, etc. But yeah, I mean, Information Services Department, that was, there was some, looking back, there's some really big names, because the Racing Post bought out Trainers Record the year before for their database. And with Trainers Record, they bought it off Peter Jones. With the Trainers Record, there were some really kind of like high-profile people doing pretty menial jobs in. Dominic de Garden-Hill was in the department when I was in '87. He obviously now BHA handicapper, senior handicapper. Mel Collier was there. Obviously went on to do Price-Wise. There were some really, really good people there. So it might have been a kind of like a low-key department. Just churning out all the information, really. But yeah, there were some big names started off there.
And did anybody sort of take you under their wing and give you sort of a bit of advice and sort of show you a way?
Not really. I mean, then it was kind of like, even though I was really young, I've always had my own ideas about the game, but there were some good people there. Mike Shaw and that department might be a name recognised to some. Ian Heaney was there. He went on to, be, the brains behind a lot of the Racing Post improvements from a technological side. It was good. It was like a team game, and it was fun in those days. Built some really good friendships outside of that department. That's the first time I met Paul Keeley there. He was then, that 1987. That's the first time, he's a lifelong friend and one of my best, if not the best friend I've got. He started off in the copy department, taking copy and stuff like that. A lot of people have built themselves up from a very, very lowly position at the Racing Post, and yeah, we had a big punting and drinking circle there. It was like me, Keeley, Jonathan Kay, Greyhounds, Jim Austin, Greyhounds, Paul Millwood, Bruce, the punting hairpiece Jackson. He was on the subs desk, and he's obviously racecourse reporter now, and I think he's doing some job on the racecourse now, isn't he, for RCA, or is it? Or, I'm not sure. I haven't seen Bruce for a while, but yeah, we had a very, very, very active circle socially, and I'll tell you a story about it in a moment if you want. But yeah, we had some scrapes, and like I said, we always took the piss out of each other. I'm assuming I can swear in this stuff. We always took the piss out of each other. We card schools, cash guard. We used to go to Great Yarmouth all the time, Brighton all the time. if we went for Brighton for a day, I remember Paul Keeley once, he was left out because he had to work, and he was so distraught. He's finished his work early, jumped in a cab from Rains Park to Brighton, which is like a 50, 60 quid cab, you know, even back then in late 80s. So, yeah, no one wanted to miss out. And I always remember there was one story when, you know, it was, we went to Canterbury Dogs on the Friday night after racing, and it was a big coach load from the Racing Post went down there, and well, yeah, had a pretty raucous night. I remember Millwood having, I think he had about 800 to 1 to win something in a photo finish, and he actually lost. So he went charging up there and stuff like that. So everyone took the piss out of him all day. But anyway, so we came back and we went to a girl's house that I was seeing from the Racing Post at the time, and everyone just crammed in there late on evening. And so I retired to the bedroom with her, and I woke up in the morning, and they were all still there, but they'd left by then. But unfortunately, when they left, by the time they left, they managed to sneak into the bedroom and take all my clothes, everything, like keys, every single bit of clothing imaginable. And so I was working for the Sunday Correspondent back then. Anthony Harbidge used to do that, but he'd gone away and stuff. He said, right, you are all right to do this on the Saturday. I said, yeah, I had to be at Newbury. And so I woke up pretty late on Saturday morning, and I had to borrow a towel, a £5, to get a cab. I got in a cab and with just a towel on and a £5 for him, and hoping with the two people I was sharing were home, and I had to have a mad dash to Newbury and stuff like that. It was one of the worst days of my life because I'd obviously had a horrendous hangover. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that Keeley and Jackson and Millwall. I'm never sure actually who instigated it, but yeah, that was one of the many scrapes that we all got into.
Where was the Racing Post based at that point?
Rains Park. It's about, I would say, less than 2 miles away from here. The actual offices from the outside still look the same. Actually, still got the red facade and stuff like that. But yeah, I was there till it merged with the. I was on the sports desk for a while. And I left there. You had the opportunity to stay on when it merged with the Sporting Life. You had the opportunity to stay on and go and work in Canary Wharf, or take a generous redundancy back in, I think that was 97 or 98, probably 98. So I just took the money and I went out of racing for about 3 or 4 years. Went to work for a couple of my brother's companies. And then, like I said, I've always kept in touch with the guys from back then. It was. You look back, everyone says the school days are the best days of your life, and I look back on the Racing Post really fondly. I've still got a first edition frame copy, upstairs and stuff like that. As much as I subsequently slagged the Racing Post as long as everybody else, I have a fierce kind of like loyalty. It's been tested, as we'll come on to, from various stuff that they output at the moment. But I would always love the Racing Post, especially for what it stood for back then. And like I say, I look back on it with a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment, and it was hard work. It really was hard work back then. But as soon as everyone finished 6, 7 o'clock, it was kind of like it was game on, and it was normally something to do with punting, and because Wimbledon was back open, Wimbledon Dogs was open back then, and we'd go down there. Wimbledon Dog Track had a nightclub afterwards as well. I think it was called Nelson's and stuff, and it was just like pure carnage, and cash card schools were some of the cash that changed hands 25 years ago.
Was it a bit like what we hear about the tail end of Fleet Street, where liquid lunches were normal and that sort of thing?
Not necessarily liquid lunches back then, because like I said, it was hard work. I mean, the systems back then, everyone used to work on, a lot of it was on the stone back then, and then they were really formative, kind of like computers, like ATEX and stuff like that. I mean, I'm pretty computer illiterate and stuff like that, and I couldn't draw a page like some of the guys do. But yeah, it was hard work. You got in. Well, I used to get, people used to come in at all hours from 10 till, from 10 o'clock onwards, and you stay there till the paper was off. So it could well be just 7 o'clock, but as soon as 7 o'clock gone, everyone was like there. I mean, the Racing Post were good times. I mean, everyone just thinks, the Racing Post in those days, you had some good people writing for us, some informed people. But I was thinking about, just before this, how many big touches the business had as a whole, and I couldn't think of any. But there was only one, and I was actually in the office early that morning. It was early in '88. Mark Coton used to write Pricewise then. He had a man in the Dick Hearn stable, and I don't think he was in that morning, but a guy called Sean Byrne, who was on the layout team and pagination team. So I always remember him coming into information services very early one morning, and he said, "You've just got to get on this." He said it was after the Nashwan Gallop, so I don't know whether Mark Coton called him, but basically everyone who was anybody who was in the office from 9:30 onwards or whatever it was, as soon as they came into the office, "Oh, you've got to back this, you've got to back this, and go back then." And now, then in those days, the bookmakers were quite slow. People were just getting on, not only for the guineas, they were getting on for the guineas and the Derby double and stuff like that. That was the only time where I would say inside information actually bore fruit with the Racing Post. Otherwise, it was kind of like grounded me, just saying, just trust your own judgment rather than the gossip out there, which is odd really, because they had Simon Crispard was you know a trainer and obviously ex-Godolphin. He was the Newmarket correspondent back then, but no kind of like real kind of information permeated down. So
were you getting a few quid punting back in those days?
Looking back on it now, I was just playing at it really. And you've got to remember back then, you had obviously no internet, stuff like that. I mean, you were just getting your leaflets or your form books. Everyone used to kind of like rely on. It was good because working at the paper, you were getting everything, free information. Superform was the key back then. And SIS took a while to come into the office as well. So I mean that took a year or so before it actually beamed into the office. And obviously when that came in and you actually could see it with your own eyes and taping it and stuff like that, when that was a godsend. That wasn't available to a lot of people. So yeah, back then I probably look back on it and just think I should have done a lot better than I did. But I think as with my writing, my punting has got better, a lot better with age. And
were you tipping in the Post ever?
No, they used to. They do. One of the things that the information services did, they used to allow you to. They didn't allow you to. They had contracts with the Times and Independent as the tipping pieces for them. Those papers used to outsource it, and the information services should do that. Times was belt and braces stuff, but Independent allow you to be kind of like quite flowery writing wise. And it allowed you to kind of like tip as they were in the paper with a spotlight type thing. So yeah, I met a lot of good people at the racing, the Independent there. John Cobb's now at the Racing Post still. I used to deal with Greg Wood at the Independent as well. Got a lot of good people started the Independent. Paul Haywood, Richard Edmondson. I mean it's a real. So they had a real strong thing, and we used to deal with those. And yeah, I met a lot of people. I met people through doing stuff like that.